All right, so welcome to our Birdwatching 101 program, brought to you by the Webster Public Library. And I'd like to introduce our speaker, John Boettcher, who has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure you will enjoy his presentation. So John, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you all for signing up for this, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to share my one of my favorite hobbies with you. So I think with that, I will just start with the screen sharing. And if you do have questions, like librarian Laureen mentioned, you can either ask them through the chat feature and we'll pick them up. If it's something immediate, I can stand interruptions, and lots of times you'll catch me and we might make a better presentation with your questions. So with that, I'm going to start the screen sharing feature. And there it is. Just bear with me a minute here. Oh, okay. How did we do this before, Laureen?
Okay, so I can see it. If you go to the first slide, click on your first slide, and then I think can you choose slideshow?
No, I've got something in my way. I've got the bar in my way. So now screen sharing. So stop. Okay. Let me see if I can pull that. I can. Okay. So bear with me, folks. Here we go.
There, okay. Perfect.
Now we're cooking. Okay. So this is Birdwatching 101. This is not the first time that I've done something for beginning bird watchers, and that's what I'm assuming all of you folks are. So if you're experienced bird watchers, you might find this a little tedious for you, but for the new people, I don't want to leave anyone behind. So my name is John Boettcher, and I've been birding for about 30 years. And what I want to do is show you some pictures of some photographs of birds, and we'll start out with the ones that are pretty common. In the upper left, you see the American robin, and then going clockwise, the American crow. And then down below the crow is the northern cardinal, and then the blue jay. And you notice that the bird names most of the time have two parts to them, and usually there's an adjective preceding some part that's more descriptive of the bird. But these birds you probably recognize. I wouldn't be doing you any favor if I were to teach you the intricacies of how to identify them, because you know them already. How about we look at these? In this case, in the upper left-hand corner, we have a house sparrow, and this is a pretty common bird, particularly if you have a bird feeder. You probably, like me, have lots of them around. If you don't have a bird feeder and you want to know what these look like, you can go to the Lowe's showroom in Webster, and these are the birds that are flying in and out of the store because they're nesting in the rafters, much to the dismay of the owners of the store. So following the clockwise way of doing things, the next bird over is the Downy Woodpecker. And then below him is the chickadee. And that should be black-capped chickadee because there are other chickadees, but for us, not too many. And then finally, we end up in the lower left-hand corner with the American goldfinch. So those are birds you're probably familiar with. What I would like to show you, probably in the in-field part of things, is birds that are not so familiar to you. The one in the upper left-hand corner is my favorite bird, which is a Chestnut-Sided Warbler. And you can see probably why he got that name with this mark of chestnut on his side, but there's also a nice yellow cap, okay? And this bird is one of 30 species about of warblers that come through our area. in spring. And when they come through in spring, they're in their breeding plumages like this. And they're very colorful, and the bird watchers sort of go nuts trying to find as many of them as they can. So next to him in clockwise fashion is a bobolink. And in that case, it's just one word because the bird is so unique. And this bird is a bird of grasslands. So there won't be too many in the heart of Webster, but if you go down to, let's say, the Avon area or someplace where there's a lot of agriculture, you will find them in fields of grain. This time of year they're breeding, and this is a male bobolink. Now, below him's an even stranger bird, and this is a duck species that is very common in our area, but only in winter. This bird most of the time resides up near or above the Arctic Circle. And because in winter, all of those areas are locked in with ice, they migrate down to our area to spend the winter. So for them, Lake Ontario in February is sort of like the Riviera. So, and finally, we end up with the green heron, which is a relative of the blue heron, but is a lot more secretive, and you have to spend a little bit of time in the field in order to be able to see one of these. Okay, so our area in Rochester is really unique because of the presence of Lake Ontario to our north. And what this does is it attracts a lot of birds, and it also makes them linger in our area longer. And we also have a variety of habitat around so that you can see a great number of birds. And what I'm going to show you next is 2 pages of the checklist from the Rochester Birding Association. So that's page 1, and this is page 2. And there's about 280 species that you can find in the Rochester area. And that doesn't include birds that will be here sort of accidentally, way out of range. But these are birds that have been sighted in our area often. Okay, some of them are with us year round, some of them only in winter, some of them only in summer, some of them just passing through the area. So now for the disclaimer. I am a member of the Rochester Birding Association, and I've been a member for all of the time that I've been birding. And the association is a good way of getting to know birds and their habits, and also enjoy the company of other people. The things that the RBA offer are a monthly newsletter, monthly meetings where we have speakers come and talk about bird and related topics. And some of them are from the area, some of them are like from Cornell, and some of them are pretty far afield. We once had a speaker from Havana who was the director of the Museum of Natural History. So that sort of thing happens, but the real advantage is the 50+ field trips that occur every year. And these are open, or in times of COVID, they were not open to the general public easily. But I think that those requirements are being dropped now. And in the past, they were open to the general public. You need not be a member of the Rochester Birding Association to go on one of these field trips. So what are these trips about? They're mostly all in the area. But some of them are a little far afield. We do go to Niagara Falls. We have trips where we go to Montezuma. We have several trips to the Avon area, but a lot of our trips are along the lakeshore to parks like Mendon and Webster Park, for instance, or Durand Eastman. So the way the trips work is a time is specified. Usually it's in the morning because the birds are generally more active in the morning. Sometimes it's way too early in the morning for you, but we have to bear with that. And we meet at a designation and you dress appropriately for the weather. And as a group, we go out and with the help of a leader who has researched this, we find the birds that are specific to that habitat at that time of year. So for instance, in February, we would probably meet at the mouth of the Genesee River, and we would look for ducks on the river and on the lakefront. Okay, so that's the way those trips work. And like I said, there are many trips and you need not be a member of the RBA in order to attend them. They are available on our website. So, and I have information that I can provide, but if you want to just search for the Rochester Birding Association, you just put in Rochester Birding in the search bar and that will take you to our website. So, okay, enough of the disclaimer. Let's go right into exactly how we go about finding birds and identifying them. So I'm going to move something here out of my way. There we go. So there's two ways. The first of these is by sight. And what I mean by that is you will find the bird because you'll notice its movement or it's sitting somewhere for a long period of time and you're able to tell it's a bird and it's something you might want to investigate. And then in terms of identifying them, you have to go through some kind of detective work. The first thing is just the relative size of the birds. For instance, the American crow is 19 inches from the bill tip to the end of the tail, whereas the chickadee is 5 inches. So you can pretty much distinguish these two types of birds just on the basis of size, and some other birds you can too. A lot of birds are in between these two, and size isn't a very useful determinant. The next thing is color. And in this case, I'm comparing that Cardinal was red with a blue jay, blue, right? But the other thing you notice about the blue jay is in both of these birds, both of them have crests. You can see on the top of their head, they have a group of feathers that give you kind of this woody woodpecker kind of crest. And both the cardinal and the blue jay have that. To distinguish them though, notice the black marks on the blue jay around the head and the black sort of mask around the cardinal's bill. So those, so far we've dealt with some that are pretty easy. Now this is a little harder because we have two birds, the American goldfinch and the yellow warbler, and both are found in our area, particularly this time of year. If you're just going by yellow, you probably can't distinguish them, but if you look closely at them, and this is where binoculars come in handy, you'll notice that on the goldfinch, there are black wings. Those marks are apt, and then what we have are expressed. Some Okay. That wasn't for me, right, Lorraine? Okay. The blue jay has the black mark around its head. And absent that, in the case of the bluebird, who has, although blue wings and a blue head, has this sort of orange chest and belly. So you have to get good looks in order to make out these subtle field marks. And even more subtle are these two birds, both found in our area. And one is a downy woodpecker and the other one's a woodpecker also, hairy woodpecker. And they perch in the same way, sort of upright. And they both are largely black and white. In this case, both are male birds, because of the red spot, which is a field mark distinguishing a male from a female. In the case of woodpeckers, they have a red spot on the back of their head. But telling the difference between these two birds is very difficult in the field, even though there's a size difference, but the size difference isn't that big. So what you have to look for in order to distinguish them is the hairy woodpecker has a much longer bill. Its bill is almost as long as the depth of its head, whereas the downy woodpecker, the bill is quite short relative to that. So that's how we would distinguish that. Okay.
I just have one request, that you speak up a little louder.
Louder?
Yes.
Okay. How about if I turn up, I don't know how to turn up my audio, right? Hold on a minute.
You should be, or if I could ask the people who are watching maybe to turn up their your audio a little bit. Sorry about that momentarily Zoom outage. I don't know what that was about. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, we're okay. I'm going to try and talk louder to get around that. Okay. So this sort of demonstrates why the presence of these field marks and the need to get a better look at the bird is one of the reasons why we use binoculars. And what I do, typical, let's say, landscape that you might find yourself birding in. And with your eyes, you are able to take in that entire landscape. And if anything is moving the trees, you're likely going to see it move and you're going to know where it is. But now the question is, how do you find the field marks on that bird in order to actually identify it? Now, your eye takes in that entire landscape. The binocular only takes in, instead of 90 degrees, it only takes in about 6 degrees of the field of view. So what you're looking at with the binocular is just this small portion of this large scene over on the right. But the advantage that the binocular gives you is it gives you an 8-power magnification, so that that small image there is this big. And now you're able to see features of this small object that's inside that area that you're interested in. Hopefully it convinces me, and I hope it convinces you why we use binoculars. Okay. Now, like anything, binoculars is a tool, and it requires practice in order to be able to use it effectively. Okay. And we'll get to that later. Okay. What I want to do now, though, is just give you some identification of the different parts of the binocular. And this is a schematic. At the top of the binocular in this view is our eyepieces, which go up against either our eyes or our glasses. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. A little bit further down, there's usually a slot for a strap for the binoculars, which you want to make sure you're using all the time, particularly if you're borrowing someone's binoculars. Okay. And then at the very bottom of the binocular are the objective lenses. And these are the lenses that gather the light that allow you to brightly see that small amount of area that you're looking at. There's also a focusing knob, the hinge in the middle of those binoculars that allows you to open and close the binoculars and change the distance between the two eyepieces. We'll get to that in a minute. So these are the types of binoculars most commonly found. Poro Prism binoculars, older style, but still used. And then the more recent ones that are popular are roof prism binoculars, which look like two cylinders essentially. And this one looks like a cylinder that's been interrupted and then made into a smaller cylinder. And I made mention of the fact that if you're wearing glasses, you have to make some adjustment to the binoculars. And this involves you changing the way the eye cups are. And in the case of, if you're wearing glasses, you would turn down the eye cups either by turning down the eye cup itself or by rotating the rubber eyepiece by turning it down so that you can get the eyepiece closer to your eye. Okay. It's best demonstrated in the field. Okay. The other thing that I mentioned briefly was that you have to make the allowance for the fact that your eyes are not the same as everyone else's eyes in terms of how far apart they're set. And you have to make this adjustment in the binoculars. And it's generally pretty easy to do. This diagram shows you some of what you would likely see if you have the wrong interpupillary distance, which is the technical term for it, or the correct pupillary distance. The other thing is that the image becomes much brighter when you use the correct interpupillary distance. So me trying to explain it or demonstrate it to you won't go nearly as far as me working with you in the field. So one of the reasons for the trips. Okay, now how to use the binocular. So you're in the field. This is the scene we had before. And you notice that in that square, in that tree, you notice some movement. So how then do you bring the binoculars to bear on that? And what you have to do is fix your head and remain looking at that particular area with your eyes, and then raise the binoculars to your eyes without moving your head. So one of the reasons for having the strap on the binoculars is, you know where the binoculars are. They're hanging from the strap around your neck. So you don't have to look down and grab the binoculars or to find the binoculars. You just reach down to the end of the strap, find the binoculars, and raise them up while keeping your head fixed in that position. So that all sounds very simple. It's harder to do. One of the things you should notice about the area that you're interested in are some things that are unique to the area that likely won't have wings associated with them or change. In this case, that small bit of area you notice has two limbs on the left side that are extending upward from the trunk. So when you raise the binoculars, even though the bird that you're interested in might not be there, you should be looking at that field of view with those two limbs extending upward on the left side of the trunk. So that's how you do that. In no instance do you want to do something like, well, I'll just look through the whole tree. Because with your small field of view, it'll take you the better part of a half an hour to look through that tree and make sure there's no birds in it. So this is the way you use binoculars. Fix your head, remain looking at that section of visual real estate, raise the binoculars to your eyes, and examine that area that you were looking at with your eyes, only now with magnification. So, okay. No questions. Okay, perfect. We'll go over this in the field, and it's much easier to demonstrate there. Okay. Now, the next thing is, supposing that you find a bird and you're trying to get someone else to find that bird also, and the bird happens to be in a tree. So what you can do is you can say, the bird is in the tree, and point. That isn't very useful. What is more useful is if you specify the bird is in which tree by designating it relative to some other mark. Say it's the third tree on the left, or it's the light colored tree, or it's the tallest tree, or it's the shortest tree, something like that. Then once you get everybody looking at the same tree with now their eyes still, tell them where in the tree the bird is. And the way to do this is to imagine the tree as the face of a clock. So in this case, I put the symbol for the bird over here on the right-hand side and a little low. So you could say something like, it's at 4 o'clock in that tree. And that would get people pretty close to that area, at least looking at it with their eyes. Then you might also say it's close to the trunk, or it's far on the edge. It's nearly on the edge, or somewhere in between, okay? So these are ways in which you can ask people for directions as to the bird they're looking at, and you can give directions to people for the bird that you've just found, okay? Similar situations come with birds on power lines, because there's usually a couple of power lines, and sometimes you have these big arguments with, it's a red bird, no, it's a blue bird, and people are looking at two different birds. So if we're careful about which bird we're talking about, that those kind of things shouldn't occur. And we want everybody to be able to see all of the birds. So if two birds are in sight, we want to be able to look at both of them. So this is a way of just describing where birds are. Okay. Now, another way that we have of finding and identifying birds is sound. Now, finding, the birds make various noises, and that allows us to home in on where in the real estate these birds are. Are they in the tree? Are they down on the ground? Are they in this bush ahead of us? And maybe we can't see them, but we know from the sound and a little bit of walking around where exactly they are, and we can wait until they show themselves. The other thing is that the birds, for the most part, all have unique sounds that they make, and that in and of itself will allow you to identify birds. So let's see, I showed you that trip list, or that checklist from the RBA, and I said there were 280 birds on that checklist. Really good birders can probably identify 100 of those birds just by sound alone. And this time of year, when we have leaves on the trees, seeing the birds becomes very difficult. And a lot of times birders will come back from a trip and half of the birds on their checklist will be ones that they identified strictly by sound. So I'm okay at this, but there are people that are a lot better, okay? I could play a few of these tunes. Some of them you'll know, other ones you won't. Okay, so first of these is the black-capped chickadee, and you're probably familiar that this is one of those birds that sings its name, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee, like that. But there's another call that it makes, this one. Okay, so that's a call that's pretty common. Another bird that we have that has a song is our northern cardinal. So, and then associated with our wetlands is red wing blackbird. Very unique song. You notice there's a duet going on. Maybe I can hear it, but maybe you can't. There was another bird far distant and they were echoing one another, probably declaring territory. Now, along with chickadee, there are two other birds that sing their name, which is kind of helpful because it allows people to identify the bird quickly. First of these is the eastern phoebe. Kind of cute. And eastern pewee. There we go. Now I accidentally moved my slide, so there we go. Okay, so now we get into some stranger calls. And first of these is this winter wren who has a really long and pretty song. Delightful to hear. That's a creature of the deep forest. And then a bird at night would be our eastern screech owl. Sounds kind of like a horse whinnying. And then common would be the American crow. Sounds a little different than I hear it, but it's the best representation I could come up with. And the Canada goose. Finally, the blue jay. Okay. And American robin. Yeah. So now with these, you know, you've got almost a dozen birds you can now identify by song. And the advantages or some of what we use this for is you have to know what the familiar songs are in order to be able to find the unusual ones. And the unusual ones are from unusual birds. So that's one of the reasons to learn the songs also, so that you can sort of filter out the birds that you commonly run across and find out the ones that are unusual. So if that's helpful to you. Okay, so where does all this information about the birds reside? You can get field guides, and these are books. There's a good collection of them in the library for loan, so you could take out a couple and you could look through them and see which ones appeal to you. The tendency these days is to use field guides that use drawings of the birds rather than photographs. And the reason for that is the photographs are very dependent on the kind of lighting that the bird is in. And so you could find yourself deceived in terms of what to look for. Whereas the drawings, the artist is generally going to want to draw your attention to those field marks that I mentioned that you're looking for in order to make the identification. I would suggest that you get one specific to our part of the United States. And this generally uses the Mississippi River. So there's Eastern field guides and Western field guides. And then there's ones for the whole country. If you get one for the whole country and you see a hummingbird, it's possibly one of 18. If you get one for the Eastern United States, there's really only one that's going to be here, and that's the ruby-throated hummingbird. Likewise, with the woodpeckers, it isn't quite as complicated as that, but there are 22 woodpeckers in the continental United States, but there's only 12 in our area. And the woodpeckers, as well as the hummingbirds, do sort of separate themselves by the areas that they're found in. Some of them are mountainous areas, some of them are strictly desert, some of them are more agricultural and things like that. So you can get all of that information from the field guides. So check out a few of these books. Authors commonly cited are Sibley and Peterson, and then Golden Guide also makes a small bird book that's helpful. Your computer has a variety of things that you can access via the internet. There's a lot of applications from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. One of them is Merlin, which if you're looking at a bird, you might be able to put into Merlin where you are and the general features of the bird, maybe some idea of the color and where it is in terms of in a tree, on the ground, in the water. And Merlin will take a guess as to what you're looking at, and it might allow you to sort through that with their photographs and identify the bird. The other really important feature that Cornell Lab provides is they pioneered something called eBird, which most of the bird watchers use and put data into. So if they go on a trip to a park, for instance, they will record all of the birds that they are seeing in the park and the numbers of them. And then they will send that in to the Cornell Lab, and the Cornell Lab will make that available to the general public. So you can go into eBird and you can say, for instance, where would I find a bobolink? And they will show you a map with pins on the map that pretty much distinguish birds that were seen in the last week from those that were seen a month ago. So very useful. There's one application that impressed me about eBird that they used in California. They had they were noticing that there are rice fields in California that are allowed to go fallow and then are flooded certain times of the year. And what they were able to do using eBird is to find out when it would be most advantageous for the birds to have the flooding. And they were able to persuade with money the farmers to flood those times of year. So there's an example of something where you can use this eBird data to realize a benefit to a species of bird that might otherwise be threatened. For you though, eBird is where to bird. Okay, you use that where to bird. And likewise, the Rochester Birding Association, on their field trips, most of the time they'll tell you what birds they're looking for. Okay, so I think I covered already the naming of the birds and the fact that there are two-part names, but most of the birds really carry a Latin name also, which I don't pretend to know or care much about. So the only other thing I would do is, let me go back to finally, yeah, there. Okay, so this is the checklist once again. And you'll notice there are gaps in the checklist. There are sections that are separated from other sections. And this groups the birds into certain families. And this is true on a worldwide basis. So some families are more extensive or better represented in our area than others. So when I show you this list that you're going to get via email from librarian Lorraine, there's a lot of birds on it, 280. You aren't going to go out and try and find all of these birds. What I suggest is maybe focus on a small percentage of them. And what I've done here is, instead of 280 birds, I've picked 24. And I picked them so that there are birds on that list, like the Canada goose here, which are here all the time. But then there are other birds like the white-winged scoter that's only here in winter. And then there are other birds like the common grackle that's only here in summer. So if you were to take this challenge, for instance, it would take you a whole year in order to do this. If you started now, you might be done in February, But you have both summer birds, winter birds, and birds that are here all year round. Okay. And extra credit that you get, just like the exams, you took in high school, extra credit would be if you can identify both the male and the female of the species. Now, in some cases like the crow, there's no distinguishing them, but a lot of the other ones, there is male plumage and female plumage. So now I'll get a little more personal. This is why I go bird watching, and I just, hammered this list together just for my own benefit, but I've shared them with people. So I get a lot of social benefit from bird watching. There are people that I've been birding with for 25 plus years. So I know them, they know me, and it's very comfortable to be in their company. Then there's the competition aspect of birding. It'd be nice to be the first person to find the first warbler of the year, or the last warbler of the year, or the first red-breasted merganser. And there's people that are keying into that kind of a challenge. Likewise, how many species of birds can you see in the year? Of that 280, do you get 200 like I get, or can you do 220 or 240? The hunting part of things is also, I find interesting. There's a bird, it's in this bush, it isn't going to come out, it's calling, and you have to more or less maybe navigate around that bush in order to get a good look at it, or somehow wait long enough so that it shows itself. Okay. It is a gentle physical activity. You know, there's sort of a reason for a walk. And the only thing you really have to carry are a pair of binoculars. You get enjoyment of nature, or you get exposed to other animals, trees, flowers, just the habitat that you're in. You kind of mark the seasons with the trips. So I think it would be interesting, and I think it would be possible to maybe come up with 3 birds, unique birds, and a good birder might be able to tell you what month it is. So that's how specific some of these comings and goings of the birds are. Birding is a way of getting you to travel to new places. People travel to play golf. Birding is, for me, a lot more interesting than that. And you also, when you travel to a new place, not just in our area, but let's say California or the South, Texas, Florida, further afield, maybe another country up in Newfoundland or down in Mexico, Central America. There's a different variety of birds, and you get sort of tested, and you also become aware of how wondrously varied their plumage and behavior is. It's all very interesting to me. You have a chance to build your identification skills by studying and practicing in the field, both with regard to binocular skill and also identification. You get kind of wrapped up in the natural history of the birds, like why are some of them here year round and other ones only in winter, summer? What are they doing? What's that bird doing? Why does it sit like this? And there are all kinds of questions you come up with, and then there are resources you can go to figure these things out. No matter how many times you've seen a bird, there's always a better view awaiting you. So I've seen my chestnut-sided warbler a lot of times, and I'm up to, I think, an 8 for quality of view on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm still waiting for a 9 or maybe even a 10, but you know, maybe there's 11. I think being a birder, you get an appreciation and understanding for natural areas and the need to preserve them. And finally, it affords you an opportunity to pass along your understanding and enthusiasm to others. So that's sort of the reason why I'm doing this right now. And with that, I would pick up what we have with regard to, I want to stop the share. Do we have questions from people or chat, or did I put anyone asleep? Did I lose anybody?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but feel
Okay.
free, everyone, to either put something there or unmute and we can have questions.
Yeah.
And John, while we're waiting, you were going to mention about the in-person sessions.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So there's 2 in-person sessions. One of these coming up this Saturday at 9 o'clock, and we're going to meet at the library entrance. And the other one is the 26th of this month. And so just dress appropriate for the weather. And we're going to be not marching long distances, so just some kind of sensible footwear. I don't anticipate us getting away from anything other than maybe parking lot or boardwalk kind of habitat, okay? If you have binoculars, please bring them. So, and that'll be 9 o'clock, okay?
And if you haven't already registered, you do need to register because we're limiting the size of the group. And you will find that on our website calendar. But I think a number of you are registered to come this Saturday, so that'll be great.
Okay, so.
Any other questions? Oh, we have a comment. Nice job,
Oh,
John.
nice.
Very
Yeah.
informative. Well done. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's probably some relative of mine.
Anybody else? All right. Well, if
Yeah.
not, I will stop the recording and feel free to stay and ask questions if you'd rather then. And I will be sending you the email with the list that John is sharing.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to
Okay.
stop the recording.